Hello everyone. Today is March 31st, 2020. I had originally planned for this video to cover what pulled me away from working on this channel for more than 2 years, and how what I experienced during that time reshaped my vision for this channel and motivated me to begin producing content again. I felt for a long time that I have a unique lens through which to explore the pursuit of happiness and purpose in our lives, and despite being sidelined for 2 years due to a lot of flux in my own life, that desire to create something of value to share with others, it's remained strong within me. So right now it's springtime in Southern California, and this B-roll video I recently shot that you see playing in the background, it shows off the postcard perfect weather we typically have here this time of year. But at the same time, if you look closely, you'll notice there's a lot missing. And because a week before I shot this video, these streets were, as they usually are, just really full of people, alive with activity. But then things changed. I don't know what year it is when you're watching this video, but if you were alive anywhere in the world during the time that this video was made, then you know firsthand why my plans changed. Because not long after we celebrated the start of the year 2020, everyone's plans changed. Today, we've just reached the end of the first quarter of this year, and yet the pandemic, called coronavirus disease 2019, has already resulted in a worldwide death toll and economic impact comparable to what happens during a war. COVID-19 is now the Earth's apex predator, having moved swiftly across borders and oceans, killing tens of thousands of people, and literally paralyzing communities across the globe, sending people to hiding out of fear. As I record this video, overall worldwide and certainly here in the US, the rates of infection and death appear to still be accelerating. So how did we get to this point? It's interesting that a year ago, months before coronavirus became a household word, the focus was on China for another reason, as it continued its decades-long wrestling match with the US regarding trade. Back then, a different type of epidemic was sweeping across China, and news reports made it clear that the impact was pretty significant, or at least it seemed that way at the time.
Highly contagious, untreatable, and fatal to pigs. African swine fever grips China. In just 9 months, it's ripped through every Chinese mainland province. More than 1 million pigs culled, yet the epidemic shows no sign of abating. The nation's appetite for pork remains undeterred, and it's set to drive prices up at home and abroad. To make up for the shortfall in supply, China is turning to imports, including pork from the United States, despite heavy tariffs imposed amid the current trade dispute. In the first 2 weeks of April alone, it bought over 100,000 tons of US pork, and that's almost 20 times more than purchased in the same period last year.
This particular African swine flu, unlike H1N1, which killed over 18,000 people a decade ago, doesn't affect humans. And it's not a coronavirus, but it played a role in the political and financial chess game that resulted in a trade deal last December that Wall Street media cautiously embraced, hopeful that it would help ensure that the long-running financial bull market, especially here in the United States, was set to continue in 2020.
President Trump has signed off on the U.S.-China trade deal to avert the December tariffs.
So the question is, why does this stage 1 trade deal feel so different to me? For once, we actually have something that the People's Republic needs. Pork. I think people don't understand just how badly this African swine flu epidemic has hit China. Pork is a staple of the Chinese diet. The country is ill prepared for this scourge. What else makes the trade deal different? President Trump's tariffs have sparked an exodus of companies moving their manufacturing capacity from China to just about anywhere else. The Chinese want that exodus to stop, and it's working. The longer this exodus goes on, the more that...
Oh, Kramer, and all was going so well.
And you know what? You don't even have to worry, because this is why I learned at Goldman, you always carry a pocket handkerchief.
So Kramer's on-camera sneeze last December 16th was just a quirky TV moment, and really had nothing to do with the biological bomb that had already started to go off in Wuhan, China, on the other side of the world. But the timing was uncanny given the ominous and then frightening news that began to surface from China and other parts of Asia as 2019 ended and 2020 began.
Chinese health authorities are still working to identify the virus behind a pneumonia outbreak in the central city of Wuhan. According to authorities, the number of cases has increased to 44, with 11 of them in serious condition.
Hong Kong reported 2 more cases linked to Wuhan flu, bringing the city's total cases to 5. 121 people are under medical observation in Wuhan. Rumors on social media alleged that the outbreak in Wuhan could be linked to SARS.
Authorities say it is untrue and 8 people were detained for spreading fake news online. Health officials have ruled out common respiratory diseases such as influenza, avian influenza, and another virus, and they added that no obvious human-to-human transmission had been seen and no medical staff had been infected.
China is battling a new and rapidly spreading respiratory virus. The number of people infected has tripled to more than 200, and President Xi says it needs to be resolutely contained. Now, the virus first appeared in Wuhan in December. The authorities say it passed to humans from animals at this food market in the city. But if it began in Wuhan, then there were cases recorded in Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen. We also know South Korea and Japan have confirmed 1 case each, and there are 2 confirmed cases in Thailand. 3 people have died from pneumonia, which has been caused by the virus.
A dangerous virus is spreading rapidly in China, and U.S. officials are very worried that it could come here.
As it turned out, containing the coronavirus was just wishful thinking, and it didn't take long for U.S. media outlets to announce that these fears were confirmed.
Now to growing concerns about the deadly coronavirus officially hitting the U.S. Here's what we know. A Washington state resident fell ill after returning from Wuhan, China, where the outbreak began. Officials now say more than 400 people have been sickened and 9 people have died. The World Health Organization is holding an emergency meeting right now.
Despite the rising number of cases, the World Health Organization has refrained from declaring a global health emergency.
And the question was whether this event constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. Now is not the time.
While the World Health Organization and most of the rest of the world continue to monitor the progress of COVID-19, at Ground Zero in Wuhan, video footage surfaced documenting how the rapid spread of the disease was taking a toll on those both trying to avoid and combat its effects.
But China isn't taking any chances. Transport links within and to a number of nearby cities have been cut, and the fear of contagion has produced dramatic scenes, like here at Fuzhou Airport, where a man suspected of carrying the virus was confined to a quarantine container.
Corridors packed with patients waiting for the test results. Major hospitals in Wuhan have been overwhelmed with outpatients over the past few days.
Very quickly, news reports confirmed COVID-19's presence in a growing number of parts of the world, and just days after its preceding announcement to the press, the WHO again stepped before the media to confirm it had reconsidered its stance on the threat posed by the disease.
Almost 1,300 people now infected with the coronavirus, and the authorities have put more cities under quarantine. That's affected about 56 million people in total. Outside China, 3 cases have been confirmed in France. That's the first time the virus has been identified in Europe.
Other coronavirus was confirmed in a couple of new countries today. The Philippines has its first confirmed case, a 38-year-old woman from Wuhan.
Over in India, a patient in the coastal state of Kerala has tested positive for the virus. It is India's first confirmed case.
I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern over the global outbreak of novel coronavirus.
As January 2020 drew to a close, U.S. President Donald Trump, while out on the re-election campaign trail, he put an optimistic spin on the growing COVID-19 crisis. All this as his administration formally identified the disease as a national threat.
And now we're friends with China. In fact, maybe we've never had a better relationship, and we're working with them very closely on the coronavirus. We're working with them very, very closely. We only have 5 people. Hopefully everything's going to be great. They have somewhat of a problem, but hopefully it's all going to be great. But we're working with China, just so you know, and other countries very, very closely, so it doesn't get out of hand. But it's, it's something that we have to be very, very careful with, right?
I have today declared that the coronavirus presents a public health emergency in the United States.
As January ended and February began, news outlets reported that while COVID-19 casualties in China continued to mount, the disease's spread was accelerating elsewhere and beginning to kill people outside of China. Reports also began to surface of how fear of the disease was unfortunately creating victims of another kind.
Unwelcome but expected, the coronavirus has hit the UK. It's inside this hospital in Newcastle, where 2 patients from the same family are now in isolation and being treated by specialist NHS staff.
On Saturday, the Philippines confirmed its first death from the virus, and the first actually outside China.
In a matter of days, Dr. Li Wenliang went from treating patients to becoming one. The 34-year-old ophthalmologist diagnosed Saturday with the Wuhan coronavirus. But if action had been taken when he and others started sounding alarms, the severity of the outbreak might have been understood sooner. With Li coughing too much and breathing too poorly to speak by phone, we asked Li by text, "How did you feel when this happened?" "I felt a little afraid I would be detained, afraid my family would worry," Li responded.
Japan has quarantined a cruise ship carrying more than 3,700 people after a passenger who was on board last month tested positive for the coronavirus.
Oh, we're hearing more stories of coronavirus discrimination.
And I know everyone's concerned about coronavirus, but again, there are all sorts of carriers now too. It's not just the Chinese-looking people.
Lyft confirms tonight that one of its drivers no longer works for the rideshare company. A woman who is Asian tweeted that the driver refused to open his door until her white friend approached. Then the Lyft driver demanded to know if they were coming from China. She says the driver went on to insist that both Lyft and Uber drivers are refusing rides to anyone who looks Asian or has an Asian name.
The Chinese whistleblower doctor who told the world about the coronavirus in Wuhan has died.
This is the Chinese doctor who tried to warn the medical community about the coronavirus. He was told to be quiet by the authorities before weeks later being diagnosed with the virus himself. Here we can see BBC Chinese reporting on this, saying Dr. Li was declared dead initially at 9:30 local time on February the 6th, and that was reported by state media, but it got more complicated. Initially, there was a huge reaction on Chinese social media to this news, and then journalists and doctors at the scene who did not want their names used told the BBC that government officials then decided to control the flow of information by ordering the doctor to be put back on life support, despite the fact he was dead, and to change official media reports from death to in critical condition. Well, that attempt to shut down the story has failed, and official Chinese media is now reporting the death of Dr. Li. And the background to this is that Dr. Li posted a warning on a group chat of medics in December. He said he'd seen 7 cases that he thought resembled the SARS virus that led to a global epidemic in 2003. Chinese police then accused him of making false statements, of severely disturbing the social order. He was then forced to sign a document in which the authorities said, "We solemnly warn you, if you keep being stubborn with such impertinence and continue this illegal activity, you will be brought to justice. Is that understood?" And underneath that, Dr. Li had written, "Yes, I do." Even in January, officials in Wuhan, where the virus began, was insisting that only those who came in contact with infected animals could catch the virus. That wasn't true, and no accurate guidance was issued to protect doctors who'd been in contact with infected people. Then we were told Dr. Li had fallen ill, and finally on the 20th of January, China did declare an emergency connected to the virus. Go on to the end of January, and Dr. Li posted this picture with the words, "finally diagnosed." He confirmed he had the virus. Well, the pictures of Dr. Li in his hospital bed are going to become among the defining images of this crisis, despite China's efforts to manage this story.
Like many of you, I don't really know much about Dr. Li, and I certainly don't know if he considered epidemiology one of his fortes, or if it really was one of the things he thought of as being his purpose in life. But though he died along with so many others, his decision to initiate public dialogue about COVID-19, despite his government's efforts to initially discredit him and his message, gave a slim but meaningful head start to the world in understanding what it was going to face in the months ahead. Throughout the rest of February, it became clear that COVID-19 wasn't just a pandemic, but was destined to impact the world in a way that no viral outbreak had since the H1N1 pandemic. President Xi made his first public appearance in China addressing COVID-19 and the efforts of his country people to fight it, and President Trump continued to tout the United States' relatively good fortune up to that point.
Chinese President Xi Jinping made his first public appearance on Monday since the start of the outbreak. Xi said the situation at the moment remains very serious, but expressed confidence that China can survive the epidemic.
On behalf of the Communist Party of China Central Committee, I pay my highest respect and extend my sincere thanks to you, to all the medical workers who are combating the epidemic across the country.
Well, the number of dead from the coronavirus outbreak now stands at 813, all but 2 of the victims dying on the Chinese mainland. The virus has now killed more people than SARS nearly 2 decades ago. It has also infected more than 37,000 people worldwide in over 24 countries.
I'm not feeling good about it. It scares me, man. It's like these things absolutely can wipe out millions and millions of people before they can get a handle on it.
An 80-year-old Chinese tourist has become Europe's first coronavirus fatality. The pensioner from Hubei province was taken ill 3 weeks ago while on holiday in France and died yesterday. Here, all but one of the 9 patients in the UK to have tested positive for the virus have been released from hospital. The Health Secretary said it was evidence that the NHS is well prepared to deal with the virus. But a survey of NHS staff by this programme shows that many are concerned about the lack of capacity.
Suspected cases of the new coronavirus from China have been reported in Mexico, Brazil, and Russia.
The coronavirus outbreak continues to spread worldwide, with Iran and Italy getting hit especially hard.
Iran's deputy health minister has tested positive for the coronavirus.
And the number one priority from our standpoint is the health and safety of the American people. Because of all we've done, the risk to the American people remains very low. So we have a total of 15 people, and they're in a process of recovering, with some already having fully recovered.
The Centers for Disease Control says the coronavirus could soon turn into a pandemic sweeping across the globe, and the U.S. will not be immune.
It's not so much a question of if this will happen anymore, but rather more a question of exactly when this will happen and how many people in this country will become infected.
With just 57 known cases in the U.S., the CDC says the U.S. risk is low for now.
But by the end of February, the disruptive effects of COVID-19 were clearly appearing in financial markets and on grocery shelves across the globe, and the U.S. joined the list of countries mourning the loss of a citizen claimed by the disease.
Fears of the coronavirus mean the stock market could be headed for its worst week since the 2008 financial crisis. The Dow Jones Industrials, NASDAQ, and S&P 500 all fell more than 4% yesterday. It was the Dow's worst one-day point drop in history.
Several countries outside of China are seeing shortages of face masks and hand sanitizer, while concern grows over China's coronavirus epidemic.
The first death from coronavirus here in the United States. A man in his 50s dying from COVID-19 infection in Washington state. Authorities describe him as an at-risk patient but say he had no apparent travel to China. It is one of several new cases there. The governor declaring a state of emergency.
People are getting nervous. And listen, I'm not a doctor. All I know is think about how the world would be if you tried to quarantine everybody because of the generic type flu. Now, I'm not saying this is the generic type flu, but maybe we'd be just better off if we gave it to everybody, and then in a month it would be over, because the mortality rate of this probably isn't going to be any different if we did it that way than the long-term picture. But the difference is we're wreaking havoc on global and domestic economies.
Hundreds of shoppers rush into a Los Angeles Costco this morning with this warning: supplies are being rationed to keep up with the unprecedented coronavirus panic shopping. Customers run down store aisles at full speed and then quickly start loading up their carts.
You have to be calm. It'll go away.
President Trump telling Americans not to panic as the number of confirmed coronavirus cases climbs.
His remarks followed him signing an $8.3 billion spending bill to fund the government's emergency response to the coronavirus outbreak.
4 sub-Saharan African countries confirmed their first coronavirus cases. Senegal has registered 4 cases, all foreign nationals, and South Africa, Nigeria, and Cameroon have 1 case each since the outbreak emerged.
By mid-March, the COVID-19 news cycle began to turn its attention increasingly towards Europe, in particular Italy, where despite that country's relatively modern healthcare system, the disease has killed 10% of its victims. The diversions of modern life, such as sports and other entertainment, became expendable, and the stock market continued to run red.
I am delivering my prayers this week via a video link from the Vatican's library, the Pope explained. He was fearful that if he appeared in person on the balcony, too many people would gather and the virus would have another chance to spread. The number of infections in Italy has jumped by nearly 1,500 in 24 hours. And for some of those infected, that means intensive care in isolation. Italy's Prime Minister spoke of making sacrifices to protect the health of all citizens and announced restrictions on the movement of a quarter of Italy's population in the country's northern provinces.
The right decision is to stay home. Our future is in our hands. We must be responsible. The entire Italy will be under protection. We will avoid movements across the entire country.
And the NBA has made the decision. They have just announced that they are suspending play. They're going to let tonight's games finish. But starting tomorrow, NBA play is suspended. And then the league is going to use that hiatus to decide their next steps, how they'll go forward. But this is the last night of NBA games for the foreseeable future.
There are now more than 1,030 cases here in the United States. 1 week ago, there were just 126. The virus is now linked to at least 32 deaths nationwide. It has spread to 37 states and the District of Columbia. 15 of them are under a state of emergency. Globally, we've got more than 120,000 cases reported. You know, a growing number of schools and universities around this country have canceled classes for now. Big events like the Coachella Valley Music and Arts Festival have been postponed, and Sunday's Democratic presidential debate will be held without a live audience.
And now to Wall Street, which hadn't experienced a sell-off like this in nearly 33 years. The Dow plummeted, losing 2,300 points. That's nearly 10%. The S&P 500 fell 9.5%. The NASDAQ about the same. Jill Schlesinger tonight on a brutal day for investors.
The latest slide began last night after the president's address to the nation. Futures plummeted, and the fall continued through the opening bell. Stocks dropped by more than 7%, forcing a 15-minute halt in trading for the second time this week.
Today, is definitely the worst day we've seen.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Tonight Show. I'm Jimmy Fallon. As of this morning, we planned to do a show with a full audience, but as the day progressed and the more we thought about it, we and NBC decided it would be smarter to not have an audience in order to do our part to help decrease the spread of the coronavirus. So the show is going to be a little different than it normally is.
To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency. 2 very big words. The action I am taking will open up access to up to $50 billion of, very importantly, very important, and a large amount of money for states and territories and localities in our shared fight against this disease.
Are you confident that the Premier League season will go ahead as of April the 4th?
None of us know. We'll see.
The wife of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau tested positive for the coronavirus. Sophie Trudeau is said to be feeling well. The Prime Minister himself is not showing symptoms, but the two will remain in isolation.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned the worst is yet to come.
I must level with you, level with the British public. More families, many more families, are going to lose loved ones before their time.
For many Americans, each day they're told to stay home from work due to the coronavirus is a step closer to hardships. I mean, about half of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. How do you prepare for something like this, which is, we don't know how long it's going to last?
I don't think you can prepare at this point. You're in it. Anything that's not mission critical, you are conserving your cash. Again, this is truly a problem because we know that a lot of financial difficulties occur as a result of health issues. And here we have it right in our faces.
Without a doubt, we know the headlines are going to get worse. They're not going to be better. Like this weekend, they'll be really bad and no one will be able to access their investments and move things around. So if you know the headlines will get worse, what is the only question you need to ask? You need to ask, at what point does the market stop reacting every time a negative headline comes out? Only then will you know that we're getting closer to the end and we are not there.
The study out of Harvard 3 weeks ago said that 40 to 70% of the US population could get infected. And yet many of us were seen as alarmists and talking, too much of this thing. Well, guess what? We're about to experience the greatest pandemic of the generation since polio. Get prepared. We've got to raise awareness, and that's what I'm concerned about. We still don't have awareness out there. Look, I think every household, regardless of what politicians and government leaders say, every household should declare a state of emergency, get 3 months of food and necessary medications, whatever essential meds somebody might be on, and get ready to hunker down. Look, we're going to see probably over 1,000 deaths per day during the peak of this thing. That's not something we're prepared for. Well, guess what? Probably 250,000 to 500,000 people have it. Probably it is ubiquitous, and this idea of it being contained is an idea we need to abandon. We need to do some dramatic measures, probably similar to what we're seeing in Italy and other countries. We need to get ready to shut down a lot of customer-facing businesses in the United States, but we've got to hunker down. And the good news is, in 3 months, this thing will be over. Historically, we know pandemics take 3 months. That was the Spanish flu in 1918. That was the SARS epidemic. We will be beyond this come June or early summer. We've got to take care of each other and take this seriously.
A stark warning from one of the nation's top medical experts, Dr. Anthony Fauci. He's director since 1984 of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases.
I can say we will see more cases and things will get worse than they are right now. Bottom line, it's going to get worse. If we are complacent and don't do really aggressive containment and mitigation, the number could go way up and be involved in many, many millions. The flu has a mortality of 0.1%. This has a mortality of 10 times that.
The number that I think is grabbing a lot of people is this estimate. 40 to 70% of the world's adult population could be infected.
Yes. Whatever the number is, it's going to take a toll. If it really does spread as widely as that projection says, and that's what I think is likely to happen, then there are going to be millions of people dying. And I don't think there's any way to get around that. And so I think there's real reason for people to be concerned. I also think that we can turn that concern into actions that will make the situation better.
Today, it is barely 2 weeks since the last set of news clips I just showed aired. In that short amount of time, the predictions that seemed so mind-blowing when they were spoken have grown increasingly plausible. Where I live, COVID-19 hasn't yet taken a major toll compared to other communities, but hundreds of people here are now infected, and people are starting to die. Drinking water, toilet paper, hand sanitizer, and protective masks have become scarce or non-existent on store shelves and online. Though luckily I've been able to ensure my family has enough of these necessities so far during the crisis, it's pretty odd seeing long lines of people in the early morning waiting together with nervous tension for the market to open, trying to stay friendly, while at the same time trying to stay away from each other. And who would have thought it would take a global pandemic to cure Southern California's traffic problems? This footage was shot at 5 p.m. on a Southern California freeway during what is normally peak rush hour. Almost no cars, and this really just never happens here. The mayor of our city has ordered restaurants, bars, and public buildings to be closed. Local, regional, and national leaders are making similar decisions worldwide, and these streets you see in this footage, they're normally busy with shoppers, sidewalk diners, and people looking to party. But for now, that party is over. It's a shame wasting all this nice weather being stuck indoors, but the weather reminds me that there is hope, at least for the future, if not for this year. Yes, the hope is that come summer, this will all be over, and that this viral outbreak, like those before it, will run its course in a few months' time. But what price will we pay between now and then? As I work on this video, the casualties worldwide are just amazing, and they grow so steadily hour by hour. I have a hard time fathoming that eventually we could see numbers like these, and even greater in the US alone. But it's becoming easier and easier to visualize this as the numbers climb. Time will tell, and the future you and the future me will hopefully be able to sit around a campfire or, over a beer and get nostalgic about what actually happened when we watch this video and others documenting COVID-19 years and decades from now. But in the meantime, life goes on. And while preventing sickness and death is job number one during the pandemic, how can we find ways to not only endure this situation in a positive manner, but even possibly use this exceptional situation to improve our lives? I can't blame you if you feel that a question like this is not even worth a thought for now. I can't blame anyone for just trying to mentally and physically wait this thing out. I can't blame people for only focusing on staying safe and reserving what will they have stored in themselves to fight the disease if they're unfortunate enough to catch it. The United States and other countries are allocating money to give to businesses, individuals, and social services to help them weather the crisis. But how long will this aid last? How long can it last? And will it even be enough, especially for the millions of people who have already lost their jobs due to the degree to which the disease has dampened the economy? The end of this month is today. What will happen when rent, utility, and other bill payments come due for the next month starting tomorrow? This could be the cruelest April Fool's Day ever for hundreds of millions of people. It's beyond shocking to see in this country how in less than a month so many people's ways of life had gone from normal, and if not prosperous, at least sustainable, to the brink of financial ruin. I'm one of the lucky ones so far because I still have a job, I'm able to pay my bills, I can feed my family, and we're healthy and able to cope with life in semi-isolation. It's been hard in some ways, but it's been okay. We're doing okay. And I can still chase my dream of being a YouTuber as long as the crisis doesn't destroy the internet. But depending on how long this crisis lasts, luck could change, as it already has and will continue to do for so many others. While it appears inevitable that in time over 1 million people will eventually contract COVID-19, it is sobering to realize that the majority of COVID-19 victims will actually just be collateral damage of the disease. Not directly infected, but their lives nonetheless so greatly impacted and suffering, even though they never contracted it. And I get it, and most of us in the human race have come to understand by now, that whether or not it's us making the choice or the government telling us to do so, now is the time to trade social freedoms for preventative confinement. This strain of virus is really no joke. It is radically contagious, and for those patients who experience its worst symptoms and end up on ventilators, life or death, it becomes a coin flip, and the odds are stacked on the wrong side of that coin. Yet though many people have died, and unfortunately many more will die, and all of us will have our lives changed for the worse to some degree as the crisis continues to choke commerce that normally sustains the world's modern societies, COVID-19, like the H1N1 pandemic, like Spanish flu, and other horrible, horrible episodes of disease before it, it will eventually pass. It's important to know that while we may lose to this pandemic now and for the foreseeable future, we will eventually win. And since health and life itself can never be guaranteed each day, COVID-19 or not, it is so important for each of us to not let the situation emotionally beat us down, to not just place our hope in our governments to save us, even if we're lucky enough to receive a meaningful but ultimately insufficient handout. We may be losing the way of life we know, and we may even lose the life we have, but that is why it is that much more important that we live each day like it matters and win now. That we strive to improve our lives and plan for and expect a better future now, no matter how bad things get or will get today, this week, this month, or longer. Knowing that the situation will get worse before it gets better, I shot some footage at this beautiful spot by the ocean before it, like other public parks and gathering places, was ordered closed. It's great to see news reports and people around the world finding simple and innovative ways to maintain social distance, but still interacting with each other to keep spirits up despite the crisis still worsening. And beyond social distancing, masks, hand washing, and other precautions, how can we improve our health and fitness so that if infected, we survive COVID-19? How can we address the indicators in each of our health profiles? Whether it's obesity, whether it's blood pressure, high blood sugar, things that can help us stack the odds in our favor to beat this thing and survive. For those of us still employed or still able to sustain our incomes, can we use this crisis as an opportunity to truly understand what is important to us, our families, and our employees? Knowing that something like this will happen again, whether you run a family, a business, or a government, how clearly does this crisis underscore the need to prioritize expenses in our budgets for ourselves and for others, and if necessary, adjust how we spend and how we otherwise use our cash flow and the assets we are fortunate to retain once COVID-19 subsides to ensure we have the necessary funds in place to make it through the next major emergency. Because it will come. It may not be another global pandemic on this scale, but if it affects you and your community, it will matter just the same. Here in Southern California, it's probably going to be a major earthquake or some huge brush fire. Despite the opportunity during this current crisis for our species to evolve to a higher level of collective compassion, unfortunately, there will still be conflicts. There will still be wars. Hate, greed, and the suffering and death that come from people motivated by these forces will remain long after a vaccine for COVID-19 has been put to use. If nothing else, at a personal level, COVID-19's presence can encourage each of us to be more grateful than ever to wake up alive each day and to reflect on and savor that simple gift. Has this crisis given you a greater sense of a reason to be alive? If you have a long-term plan and have a strong vision of what your purpose is in life and the goals to achieve it, what changes are you making so that you can stick to your plan despite the ongoing crisis? And even if your energy and thoughts are simply devoted to getting through this ordeal the best you can, what are some activities you enjoy or might consider that can help you and your loved ones stay healthy and resilient in mind and body, and brings you and perhaps even others happiness each day? For me, without a commute across town most days and eating lunch at home, that frees up about 2 hours each day I can spend with my family and for working on this YouTube channel. I've been meaning to do a lot of organizing and rearranging at home to make it easier to create content for YouTube and my brand in general, so I'm glad that I'll have more time each day to get that done. I've ordered some gear for my home studio, and I'm enjoying the process of trying, failing, and learning how to use these different tools. The street on which I live doesn't have a lot of foot traffic, so I can still take walks outdoors, get fresh air and sun, as well as exercise at home. And I've also asked my kids to let me know something that each of them really wants to learn while school's out, versus something that they're forced to study at school, and I've offered to help them with whatever those things are. My son wants to work on his drawing skills and learn the basics of the stock market of all things, and my daughter wants to learn to play the drums. There's also something to be said for each generation, not only learning about adversity and scarcity in a book, but actually living through it. My parents lived through multiple wars and the hard times that followed them. I've had it much easier. And so even for young people living in modern societies who've been relatively untouched by natural disasters, pandemics, and famine, they're now gaining a first-hand frame of reference and appreciation for what people in past generations, in past centuries, suffered through, and also an appreciation for the conveniences to which they've become accustomed and for life in general that no amount of lecturing by a parent or teacher can provide them. Generation Z now knows what a plague is, and that plagues are not just horrible, but primitive events recorded in the history books that modern society made obsolete. And perhaps most simple and most satisfying of all, for me personally, without the frantic routine of getting ready for work and school, most days I can just wake up, cuddle with my wife, and actually have a simple and unrushed conversation with her as we start our day. Now since my channel's barely on anyone's radar at this point, I'll probably get little if any feedback while COVID-19 is still running rampant, but I would really love to know down in the comments, regardless of when you're watching this video, how you stayed sane and kept winning at life, despite the most world-changing pandemic of this generation. For those of you who come across this video during the crisis, I'm really rooting for you and your loved ones, your community, for all of those who you care for to come out of the other end of this situation, not only healthy, but better than ever in all aspects of your life. Yes, let's do what we need to do to get through this, and then let's plant the seeds for that future along the way. Thanks for your interest in this video time capsule project of mine. It's amazing to think that the world has changed so much in such little time due to COVID-19, and that the saga is really still unfolding. No one video can properly capture the experience of these times, but I hope you've enjoyed this video all the same. Before I sign off, I invite you, my friends, to join me in a virtual toast. Come what may in the days, weeks, and months to come, here's to us and the good times ahead.